A Potiki, and I was going to hold on to a Potiki till a little later, but now that we're into it, I just want to mention this. And I tell you what I really hate about the reporting of gang stuff. This is a story by Mariana Garcia and stuff, and she goes, and all this problem in a Potiki now is because of the death or murder or killing of a guy called Stephen Rota Tayatini, who was apparently the president, whatever that means, of a local bunch of scumbags called the Mongrel Mob Barbarians, and I'm sure they're a lovely bunch of people. But always we get this crappy balance in stories like Stuff Runs, and they go and they interview some guy with tats and a bald head who wears a black singlet and apparently is involved in meth. He looks like a gang member himself. His name's Billy McFarland. And he said that this guy, who was the president of the Barbarians Mongrel Mob chapter, needed to be acknowledged for the good stuff he's done. He was a good family man, McFarland said. He's worked seriously hard to help make changes in the methamphetamine harm space. He and his partner Pauline have done a lot of work. He said his death was a tragedy. He wasn't a bad guy. He's going to be missed. He was quite a pleasant fellow to talk to, and he wanted to do good. McFarland said regardless of Tayatini's gang connections, he had done many, many good things. That stuff doesn't go away. Bullshit. And I'm sorry, that's strong language. Rubbish. He was a gang member and a gang president. He was inculcated in a life of crime. He was the head of an organisation that demands that its members and young, vulnerable young men commit crimes to be initiated into the gang. You spread misery through selling drugs. You rely on violence and standover tactics. You have no regards for the laws of the land, for the dignity of others, for the sanctity of others in terms of their physical well-being, or indeed for their property rights. So I'm sorry, I'm sick and tired of articles that get some equally bogan idiot saying that a gang leader or someone who got shot wasn't a bad guy. There was some piece and stuff about some intergenerational gang killing as well. I just don't care anymore. And if you are in or from around a Potiki and you want to talk about this after 8:30, please do give me a ring. But let's talk about police and law and order and the like. And we've got a new column up from Chris Trotter on the platform Opinion Sites. And in it, Mr. Chris Trotter, who is, of course, a well-known New Zealand First Party supporter, and former Labour Party supporter, he's going to hate me for that, but it's so good I'm going to stick with it. He's written a piece about what happened at the parliamentary protest, says about our police force and its preparedness in this day and age to deal with disobedience. And whether or not, to be honest, it's up to its job, I think is the question he was asking. But talk about the column more and his thinking behind it. We are joined now by Chris Trotter. Welcome, comrade. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, comrade. Although the use of the word comrade on radio at the moment is probably not a wise decision.
Can you believe that Red Radio fell for that? And I don't know, Chris, I'm not actually deeply concerned about it. I think we might just have a rogue individual here.
Oh, I think that's the case, yes.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, just parenthetically to our major discussion this morning, is that he was interviewed, I think, by Lisa Owen on Checkpoint on Radio New Zealand, and informed her that he'd been doing this for the past 5 years and no one had ever tapped him on the shoulder or suggested to him that it was a bad idea.
Okay, now, on what context was he interviewed by here? That he had outed himself as being...
No, look, I think the identity of the individual concerned is well known, certainly in Radio New Zealand and around the traps, and so Lisa Owen, I think, just rang him. She didn't name the individual.
Oh, but, okay. Okay, yeah. But who is he? I mean...
look,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I've got a name for him and we will check it out. It just seems to me it
Yeah,
is one
yeah.
sort of lone player, to be honest. All right, Chris, but you have written this piece about the police response to the parliamentary protest, and I've always thought that the truth of that protest is going to take years to come out as people go back and look at various aspects and do it increasingly dispassionately or with the wisdom and the benefit of hindsight. Firstly, do you blame police for how poorly it turned out?
Well, not entirely, because as I say in the piece, which you've got up on the platform today, 40 years of learning the lessons of the Springbok tour had brought the New Zealand police to a very uncomfortable path, as it turned out, in the early months of 2022. And you've got to understand the incredible impact of the tour on the police and the way they looked at the policing of protest and how that affected the public's view of the police. You see, the problem the police had in 1981 is that the overwhelming majority of those protesting were middle class. The sons and daughters of the professional urban middle class and a fair swag of the professional urban middle class themselves.
Or as many police I knew at the time would say, varsity wankers.
That's another expression you could use.
Yeah.
Now, the problem that the police had is that in normal circumstances, that social class is crucial to the maintenance of the respect for the law, for explaining to people, who the police are, what the police are for, why the police should be supported. Yeah, exactly. So you can't really do without them. And what happened in the aftermath of the tour was that the judiciary, which of course is also a member of the professional urban middle class, just so we don't forget, they don't land from Mars, they humiliated the police. And I mean, I was there. I saw it happen in a courtroom, a classic example where these kids were charged with being unlawfully on a building but without the intent of committing any further offence. Now, their lawyer, who was also a lecturer in the law school, said to the judge, "Oh, no, my clients are clearly not guilty because they had every intention of committing another offence. They were on that building just to look at the scenery. They were there to engage in further protest." And the judge grinned from ear to ear and acquitted the 3 or 4 young people who had been charged. And the poor old police sergeant, you could see written all over his face, "What the hell is going on here? What do you mean they're acquitted? They just admitted." Yeah, I mean, and this was repeated all over the country because a large chunk of the judiciary, there would have been conservative judges, obviously, and they may have reacted differently.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of the judiciary was saying, we're not going to give a criminal record to these kids for protesting against apartheid, for God's sake. Now, the police took a lesson from that because the polls that the police relied on, trust and confidence and all that sort of stuff, took a dive.
Yeah.
And they were very worried that they were losing the public.
Okay, so how does that affect, though, 1981, how does that affect what happened at the parliamentary protest?
Well, what it meant was that the police were seized by this idea that the people have a right to protest. And we must not hinder the right of the citizen to protest. In fact, we should try and facilitate this exercise of people's democratic rights. So we will meet with the organisers, and we will have cars up the front, and we will have police winding the march, and we will guarantee the right to protest. And The idea of the red squads and the blue squads with their heavy gear and their helmets and their long batons. I mean, these things were seen.
So you're saying by the time we
less.
got to the parliamentary protest, they had kind of, in a strange way, defunded themselves from the ability to deal with the protest.
Yeah. Well, that's clever of you, Sean. That's very clever of you, because that's the great cry of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Defund the police. And in a sense, you're right, because the investigation into the policing of the parliamentary grounds occupation did reveal that there was far too little in the way of protective equipment. There was far too little in the way of proper training for riot control. And the public saw this, for goodness sake. I mean, the first attempt, you had police officers in shirt sleeves and soft hats trying to move people off the ground. There were about 100 police officers, maybe 50 in reserve. Not enough. I mean, these were big people.
Actually, that's a really good point. How crazy, how unhealth and safety is it to send someone in to do a job that may well involve physical confrontation, and you have them in cotton trousers and a cotton shirt with a... Actually, when you think about it now, when you put it like that, Chris, it's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy, stupid, and irresponsible.
I looked at it. I watched it because it was being broadcast live, of course, or at least it was online. And as someone who has been sort of eyeball to eyeball with the Blue Squad outside Lancaster Park, I was just staggered.
Yeah.
I mean, I was saying to myself, where are the greatcoats? Where's the body armor? Where are the helmets? Where are the long batons? Where are the full-length riot shields?
So, Chris, does your article reach a conclusion? I want people to go and read it. What is the way forward then? Do we have to have go back to a day of a riot squad that can be deployed at any notice? And I guess the naive part of me wants, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't need an army? Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't need a riot squad?
Well, I think there's two ways to answer that. I think from, as you say, a health and safety point of view, vis-a-vis the police officers who are going to be asked to do this sort of work, and I think they're going to be asked to do it more and more, they must be protected. But there is a deeper problem. And I think the police, after 81, would have been very aware of that problem themselves. They only just made it in 81. They only just made it. On the last day, there were naval ratings from HMS Philomel, that's the naval base at Devonport, who were ready to aid the civil power. That means deadly force would have been in play. So they escaped from having to rely on the military by the skin of their teeth. And of course, 3 years earlier, in 1978, there had been a huge mobilization of police resources backed up by the New Zealand Defence Force to clear Bastion Point. Now, I mean, hundreds of police were required for that, just as hundreds of police were required to clear Parliament grounds. And they were backed up by the army, who brought in their Unimog trucks and all the rest of it. Now, you imagine you're the police commissioner, and you're thinking to yourself, what if these occupations were happening in other cities?
Yeah.
What the hell would we do then?
Yeah.
Because we mobilized virtually everything we had, and we brought in the army to clear a few hundred Maori protesters off Bastion Point. What if there were one too many Bastion Points, to paraphrase Che Guevara? The only recourse then is to the military power, and that means deadly force, and that means civil war.
Yeah.
So you've got that problem as well. And I think if there isn't a lot of soul searching going on in Mr. Costa's office, the police commissioner's office, then there should be.
Yeah.
Because what if you got a national government act with 20 or so MPs who insisted that their policy on the treaty be implemented? Yeah. Would our police, would our army be equal to the task
of what?
Suppressing the kind of protest that would erupt?
That you might erupt, Chris. Might erupt, Chris. You might find that many people think that's a good idea and they like the ACT policies.
Oh, yeah.
You're voting for New Zealand First, don't forget.
I'm quite sure that there are, if not a majority, an extremely large minority that believes exactly what you've said.
Yeah.
But Sean, there will be probably an equally large one that will hate it. And if you cast your mind back to Posey Parker, which is another example of policing, right?
Yeah, failing.
If you cast your mind, failing.
Yeah.
You cast your mind back to that, and you think of the sheer fury of that crowd.
Yeah.
And the physical aggression that was unleashed, and that was over transgender politics.
Apply it to race. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Chris. Yeah. So you're really calling on the police to come up with a plan here to get ready to. I hate to say it, in common parlance, harden the F up.
Well, I certainly think they need to look at their training.
Yeah.
They need to look. They are already purchasing equipment, but they really have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
And the image that stuck with me from that day when they cleared Parliament grounds was of 10 or 15 police officers, their backs against one of those big granite walls that surround the beehive in Parliament.
Yeah.
Their perspex shields held up above them like a Roman, testudo.
Yeah.
While people hurled chunks of masonry and bricks and God knows what else at them.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, that is not an image that the people of a country should have to witness.
Yeah.
Because those men and women in blue are what stands between the citizen and the criminal.
And chaos. And anarchy.
Well,
Chris, I'm going to put it to you this way.
They have to be equal.
Yeah. You are someone interested in politics, so it's a political protest you'd be interested in. What about what's happening in Apotiki right now? Apotiki College is closed for the week. Every primary school for today and tomorrow in Apotiki is closed. The bus service is cancelled because a gang member died and there are tensions in the town. What sort of crazy situation is that?
Well, in that situation, you would hope that the New Zealand Police Force would have sufficient, how best to describe this, free-floating members. I mean, whether you want to call them a riot squad or an emergency intervention force or whatever you want to call it. But, our police force should be able to flood Apotiki with 100, 200 police officers. Just completely flood the place so that, the gang members can't walk around a corner without seeing a police officer. And a fairly formidable-looking police officer at that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Because to my mind, that is going to happen more often than a parliamentary protest. I cannot believe I live in a country where a town has to close down because of outlaws.
Well, yeah, and just think, see, there are these little sort of straws in the wind historically.
Yeah.
The extraordinary scenes at Ruatoki, right?
Yeah.
Where, what the kids called the ninjas arrived. These black-clad police, body armor, helmets, masks, Bushmaster rifles.
Yeah.
And at that stage, nothing had happened, and nobody in Ruatoki had lifted a hand against the state or anybody else. Now, it's just crazy that the police decision-making processes allowed what was essentially an armed occupation force to descend upon a tiny rural hamlet like Ruatoki, and yet seems to be struggling
to keep the schools open in Ruatoki.
To keep the schools open.
Yeah.
I mean, when schools shut down, that's a sign of something extremely serious happening in any kind of society. I mean, we shut down our schools during COVID.
Yeah.
You know, we shut down our schools, you know, back in the days of polio and other diseases. Right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to shut a school down.
Yeah. Except
in the face of something massive like that.
Yeah.
You certainly shouldn't have to close your schools because a gang descends en masse on a little town.
I hear you, and I couldn't agree more, Chris. Chris, your article is up on Opinion Pieces. It'll be well read, as all your pieces are. Now, I just want to check, you are still intending to vote New Zealand First?
I've even been invited to speak.
No, you're kidding. You're kidding. Have they invited you to speak at a conference? Have you said yes?
At that conference? Well, yes, I agreed.
All right. When is that?
That's in late July. But
I'm going to go along. I'm going to go along to that.
I hasten to add, many journalists and many other public figures have graced New Zealand First conferences in the past, so this is nothing unusual. But,
good stuff.
But yes.
Chris, always a pleasure, my friend, and I am going to buy you a new phone because I've had so many requests to do so. That is Chris Trotter, political commentator, historian, New Zealand First voter. And boy, isn't that an interesting long-term look at our police force and how it works. And he basically says they're not up to the job of controlling riots anymore. And, geez, they're not even up to the job of keeping schools open in Opotiki. Ben, we had any luck in Opotiki? Again, no, not yet. Okay, we will keep trying. We're going to have Wes Curtin, the mayor of Ruapehu, talking about the new ski deal there. But Opotiki in Eastern Bay of Plenty's got more serious problems. Basically, the town's been taken over by fear. And that's what I read. It's been taken over by fear because some moron gang members did. Or gang leaders did, even though he was a good guy, eh, bro? Get stuffed, honestly. Let's have a quick break.
Connecting to the platform. It's easy to